Hello and welcome to Wednesday Warfare, where I review NXT and AEW Dynamite back to back and try and figure out which show won for the week. Beginning things with NXT. Keith Lee opens the show. I just now noticed for the first time that his Titantron and his shirt and everything says the Limitless Legion. 2 E's, Legion. What? That's a very unattractive looking word with the 2 E's for some reason. He says that the Undisputed Era, their 2019 ended great, but his ended better, and he'll be taking Roderick Strong's North American Championship. Out come the Undisputed Era, who just immediately jump on him, 4-on-1 gang beating. They Pillmanize his leg with a steel chair, and then Tommaso Ciampa runs in and tries to make the save, but the damage may have already been done. Pretty short but sweet opening segment. Really just builds Keith up as the sympathetic figure going into his match next week, as if he needs more babyface sympathy and more crowd support, but there you go. We see Tegan Nox is back at Full Sail, getting ready for the Battle Royal. Our first match of the night is the next match in the Dusty Classic Round 1, as the Broserweights, Pete Dunne and Matt Riddle, take on the South Wales subculture, that's Flash Morgan Webster and Mark Andrews. An established but lesser known tag team going against a makeshift tag team comprised of two of the biggest stars at NXT. Gosh, I wonder who's going to win that one. That being said, the guys from NXT UK really took Riddle and Dunne to the limit here. Some great tag team wrestling by both teams, actually. It ends predictably when the Broserweights win and they do the double shrug, best tag team pose in the business. In the next round, they'll be taking on Imperium. We get a recap of the end of NXT UK TakeOver Blackpool 2, very long title there, as the Undisputed Era jumped Imperium at the end of the show and beat up Walter. And then we see this exclusive footage where Walter, in so many words, says that Imperium is going to be at Full Sail next week. We then get a medical update from Kathy Kelly on Keith Lee, in which there is no update yet. Thanks, Kathy. Out comes Tommaso Ciampa for a promo of his own. Kind of similar vein to his pre-tape promos from last week, where now he's directing his ire toward Adam Cole, saying he wants his championship back, he wants his life back. Out come the Undisputed Era for a 4-1 beatdown. Where have I seen this before? But Johnny Gargano shows up on time this time and actually helps chase away the Era. We get another one of those pseudo DIY reunions that we saw a lot of before Ciampa's neck injury happened, and that's pretty much that. Very similar to what happened in the opening segment with Keith Lee, but with different ingredients. Though nice to see the Era got thwarted this time. Kind of surprised we didn't see any involvement from Finn Balor, though, since he's the one actually feuding with Gargano at this point. In the final first round matchup at the Dusty Tag Team Classic, you have the grizzled young veterans from NXT UK taking on the Time Splitters, the reunited Kushida and Alex Shelley, who's finally getting a shot in WWE. Really cool to see him here on this stage here. He really should have had that opportunity years ago, though. Kind of a busy week for Shelley on TV, because he was just on the last episode of ROH TV wrestling Jonathan Gresham, and now here he is a few days later on NXT television. When I first saw this match on paper, I immediately thought it was going to be just like the last Dusty tag team match we had earlier in the night, where the obvious team wins. But no, after some great wrestling, it's actually the grizzled young veterans who win after Ticket to Mayhem on Shelley. So kind of a shocker there, kind of a one and done for Alex and the Time Splitters together. The vets deny the Time Splitters the handshake after the match. Gibson talks some trash on the microphone and says the hipster NXT crowd pretending to know who Alex Shelley is, and basically they're there to win the tournament. It was kind of nice to get some more mic time from Gibson here. For those of us who aren't familiar or aren't really caught up to speed with the grizzled young vets on NXT UK, and now it's kind of nice to have a nice balanced ledger in the next round of the Classic. You've got 2 teams from NXT UK and 2 teams from NXT regular. We get a pre-taped little promo with Robert Stone and his charge Chelsea Green outside Full Sail. Basically, Chelsea's too good to be in the Women's Battle Royal tonight, so that's why she's not in it. And then we get a little hype package with Finn Balor watching Ilya Dragunov on a tablet, because they're going to be wrestling at Worlds Collide, and Finn says to Ilya, if you come for me, you better not miss. Obviously, Worlds Collide is closer on the calendar than TakeOver Portland, so I get why they want to put emphasis on that. But I'm again kind of shocked we didn't get one real advancement on the Finn Gargano feud at all on this show. Triple threat match: Lio Rush, Isaiah Swerve Scott, and Tyler Breeze. The winner will be added to a fatal 4-way match for the Cruiserweight Championship at Worlds Collide. And your champion, Angel Garza, is on commentary for this matchup. I really feel like the whole Cruiserweight title picture has been largely ignored since Garza won the belt last year. And, again, I don't watch 205 Live, so maybe it's getting more love on that show, because it sure ain't being seen on NXT right now, even though it's the NXT NXT Cruiserweight Championship. That being said, this match was really fun to watch, really great stuff. The story here is largely Rush and Scott. Breeze does well for what he does in this matchup, but the other two guys are really carrying the load in this match. A JML driver by Scott to win the match, so he is going to advance into that Fatal 4-Way match. Two people from NXT UK to be determined. Rhea Ripley's interviewed backstage, and she says she doesn't really care who wins the Battle Royal. She'll take anyone on, the mark of a true babyface badass champion. Then outside Full Sail, we see Gargano and Ciampa teasing a handshake for old time's sake, when all of a sudden out comes the Undisputed Era and security's trying to push them back. A wild Keith Lee appears and just starts beating up security guys as the Undisputed Era run off, and Keith Lee screaming the prophecy will end next week and everything. Call me crazy, but I feel that, well, first of all, he's not selling the ankle injury anymore. That seems to be over and done with. Maybe they'll play up on it a bit next week, but who's to say? But not only that, also the fact he's beating up security guys with reckless abandon seems to me that's kind of a way to write him out of the title match next week. I wouldn't be surprised if next week at NXT they're like, oh, you beat up all these security guys, so you're going to be fined and suspended or whatever, and so Roderick Strong will keep his championship or something like that. I'd be very surprised if he's just beating up security guys and like no retaliation for that. Main event time, it's a women's battle royal to determine who will face Rhea Ripley for the NXT Women's Championship at TakeOver Portland next month. Some notable names here. We see the return of Kacy Catanzaro. Apparently she seemed to retire last year, but she's back here now for this matchup. Mercedes Martinez in the matchup. She is the newest signee to the developmental system, NXT, what have you. I think it's a great move. I think it's great to see Mercedes get signed. I believe AEW dropped the ball in a major way, not signing her when they had the chance. Shayna Baszler also in the match too, kind of a surprise name. It's the first time we've seen her since she lost the title at the end of the year to Rhea Ripley. Also, the first three names who were eliminated in this matchup were the three least notable women in this roster. You have Catalina, the short-lived sidekick to Sin Cara, MJ Jenkins, who I've never seen before, and Jessie Kamea in the same kind of vein. They're the first three to go. I popped for Vanessa Bourne's elimination because to me it was very similar to a signature bump that Buddy Rose used to take all the time, where he'd kind of slide backwards out of the ring between the second and the bottom ropes. This one was kind of a two-step process where Vanessa like hooks her feet onto the bottom rope, and then Mia Yim drop kicks her feet to allow her to take the bump after the release. So either way you slice it, still very impressive. Baszler eliminates Martinez, so that feel-good story gets squashed. Your final four, supposedly, are Baszler, Bianca Belair, Tegan Nox, and Io Shirai, but Shotzi Blackheart, who was taken out of the ring by Deonna Purrazzo, but not over the top rope, she comes back into the ring, eliminates Shayna Baszler to a big pop, but then Belair eliminates her. Also notable thing here is that Tegan Nox is eliminated by Dakota Kai, who's not even in the matchup, and she throws a knee brace at Tegan for good measure. Is it me, or is the feud between Nox and Kai basically the female equivalent to when DIY broke up? It's down to Io Shirai and Bianca Belair, and though these two are ostensibly heels, the crowd is very much in the corner of Io in this match. Lots of drawn out action on the apron, back into the ring. Bianca ultimately eliminates Io with a KOD outside the ring, just hurls her out of the ring. So very impressive elimination. Bianca wins here. I was surprised that Bianca won this one, honestly. I thought Io would have won out of the two of them. I feel Bianca's kind of been on the periphery, kind of on the outside looking into the title scene ever since her program with Baszler ended last year. Although there's enough time between now and TakeOver that I think there's plenty of time to build her back up and make her look like a really credible, convincing opponent, like a first real challenge for Rhea Ripley. So we'll see where that goes. But I really enjoyed this Battle Royal. The eliminations were fun to watch. I think the stories they told, a lot of little micro stories in there that could possibly blossom into something else down the line. Continuing to build the story between Dakota Kai and Tegan Nox, Shayna Baszler, eliminating Mercedes, and then getting eliminated by Shotzi. So I think we had a lot of different interesting storylines going on here. Of course, Io, is this going to lead to a babyface turn for her officially? Who really knows? And of course, sets up Bianca for a match with Rhea Ripley later on. So yeah, I mean, you couldn't ask for a much better way to structure that Battle Royal, in my opinion. This week's AEW theme is Bash at the Beach. I loved that set they had here and the motif they had for the night. Your opening matchup's a 4-team tag match. It's the Young Bucks, the Best Friends, Proud and Powerful, and Paige and Omega. The winners will face SCU next week for the titles on the Jericho Cruise. Some brief tension and teamwork between all the members of the Elite as they don't fight each other in this matchup, but they do have some tension as they're on opposite ends of the ring, obviously. The announcers can't figure out who the legal men are, as we get toward the end when everyone's diving to the outside on each other, a common problem in AEW tag team matches, wouldn't you believe it? We get an 8-man suplex spot in the match, which I always find that spot to be kind of silly, but hey, did somebody say silly? Because in comes Orange Cassidy to tip the scales, make it 5-on-4 for that suplex spot while the referee is down. In the end, Hangman semi-betrays Matt with a blind tag to allow he and Omega to take out Chuck Taylor for the win. It was a wild opening contest. I loved it. I think, people were kind of comparing this match to the first Dusty tag match on NXT on the same night, and people were kind of crapping on, the AEW one, saying it was really spot heavy. So was the other one on NXT. It was different because it was 4 guys as opposed to 8. It was structured a bit differently, but I think both matches, you could argue, were very similar kind of PWG style, which makes sense because all those guys, I think, have worked for PWG. Anyway, after the match, you've got this kind of tense moment between the Bucks and Page and Omega, but cooler heads prevail. It was what it was. Cody shows up next, rocking the Don Johnson Miami Vice look as he makes his response to MJF. It's a very inside term heavy promo with Cody here. He's been kind of like walking that line in his promos the last several weeks. This one, I think, really kind of, I feel with all his promos with MJF, he kind of dips into that kind of wink nudge insider term territory here, and he did that a lot here, saying that, oh, everyone likes you because you're a really cool old school heel or whatever, this and that. He has a weird kind of backhanded endorsement of Wardlow here, where first of all, he says he accepts all the terms of MJF, like in order to fight him at Revolution. But then Revolution. But he has this weird backhanded endorsement of Wardlow where he says, I think MJF's afraid that once Wardlow makes his debut, pretty soon it's going to be MJF carrying Wardlow's bags, not the other way around, where it's like Wardlow's going to, usurp MJF or supersede him in a way. Interesting. We'll see how that actually turns out. So he takes more shots at MJF and everything. He accepts all the demands, and that's pretty much that. He says, MJF, this is not your story. You are a chapter in mine, and I will give you a scar at Revolution. And that's pretty much that. Again, the promo's a bit too insider for my tastes, but strong delivery by Cody. The conviction's definitely there. From one promo to the next, we have Joey Janela backstage. He takes a shot at Penelope Ford, basically saying the only way that she can get ahead in this business is by riding his coattails. Then he transitions to talk about Rey Fenix, who's his opponent for next week. He says he's greatly looking forward to it, in so many words. Women's tag team match up next as Brandy Rhodes and Mel of the Nightmare Collective take on Hikaru Shida and Chris Statlander. There was supposed to be Awesome Kong and Mel, but apparently she was pulled last minute due to medical reasons, so Brandy's in her place. And of course, Luther is accompanying them to the ring. What a difference the crowd makes between the opening matchup and the promo with Cody to this one. It is cricket. It's like dead silent for this matchup pretty much the whole time. At one point when Hikaru was making her entrance, Luther's like cutting her off on the ramp to allow the heels to beat up Chris for a minute, and Hikaru just beats him up with the kendo stick and goes off, and then he just sits at ringside and doesn't retaliate. So for 2 weeks in a row, you've already made Luther look like a total chump. And they keep bringing up, oh, he's this insane deathmatch wrestler. He's all this experience doing crazy stuff in Japan. Like, if you're going to don't bring that shit up. If you're going to have him look like a putz 2 weeks in a row and look really ineffective, then don't just make up a whole new backstory for this guy. Make a whole new character. Don't even bring up the fact that it's Dr. Luther, the Japanese deathmatch legend, whatever. Anyway, the match did feel a little rough around the edges. That whole thing aside, the crowd went not really into it. Chris hits the Big Bang Theory onto Mel and just like spikes her too. It looks really brutal. So anyway, Chris and Hikaru win the matchup, and boy, great look, Nightmare Collective. Why was Luther even there? We get an inside look at a secret board meeting with the Dark Order as we see some of the targets they're looking to recruit, like Adam Page, Michael Nakazawa, Brandon Cutler. The big mystery is, though, who is this Dr. Claw-like figure with a distorted voice that we don't see? Place your bets in the comment section. Sammy Guevara of the Inner Circle takes on Jon Moxley, who does not come out to his theme music, but he does roll up in his fancy new sports car he acquired from Chris Jericho. Moxley gives a lot to Guevara in this matchup here. Makes him look like $1 million. Almost a bit too giving, I would say, but you know what? These younger wrestlers have to get built up sooner or later, somehow, so it might as well be through Moxley. Kind of a cool finish where Moxley catches Guevara mid-flip into a rear naked choke, and Guevara taps out immediately, so Moxley wins, and then Chris Jericho and the rest of the Inner Circle use teleport. It's very effective, and they just beat the hell out of Moxley. 5-on-1 beatdown. Where have I seen that before tonight on Wednesday night across cable? Jericho whips Moxley with his championship belt, takes a spike out from his jacket and jabs Moxley in the eye with it. Very old school, very railroad spike to Dusty Rhodes' head there, reminiscent of that. And so, of all the gang beatings we've seen tonight, between NXT and AEW. I'd have to say this one is the most effective for a lot of reasons. It is the most visceral, makes Jericho look super devious. And then you get this backstage promo with the Inner Circle afterward where Jericho says, this is all Moxley's fault, eye for an eye, and all that stuff. And then as they walk off, Jake Hager goes, "Arr," and that killed me. Six-man tag action. The Butcher, the Blade, and MJF take on Cutie, Marshal, Dustin Rhodes, and Diamond Dallas motherfucking Page. He's in the ring for the first time since 2016 on TNT in wrestling capacity for the first time in 20 years, and true to form, still has the rib tape. Gotta love that attention to detail. It's an okay tag team match. The big story is when DDP gets the hot tag and he drops a couple people with a diamond cutter, including MJF, which gets a nice big pop. He even dives to the outside from the top rope. Whose idea was that? That's pure insanity for him to do that. Anyway, the match ends in the madness. After the big dive, MJF rolls up QT for the win. It's kind of a sneaky win. It's almost missed by the cameras there, but it ends up the heels winning and everything. It really does good. The match itself, so-so, but it does a great job making MJF even more hateable, especially with his t-shirt that he had coming up to the ring with, where he says, banging Dallas's daughter or whatever. And also, it's cool to see DDP in action. In his limited usage, he could still go. It looked really fun to watch. So that's pretty much the big silver lining with that matchup. Backstage, the tag team champions SCU get interviewed, but a couple of words into the interview, Hangman Page barges in, spills his drink all over Christopher Daniels, major faux pas. Kenny Omega is playing peacekeeper though, saying, "May the best tag team win on the high seas next week." We go to your main event as Darby Allin takes on Pac. Both guys take a lot of risks against each other early on. Darby, of course, more so, really bumping his ass off for Pac here. Early in the match, we get this kind of critical attack on the steps that really he has to kind of sell and overcome for the rest of the matchup here. It is a solid matchup. Pac wins, Pac, whatever. He wins with the black arrow to the back. Then after the match, Tony Schiavone, poor Schiavone, his interviews always they never go very well when he's in the ring with people. But he's in the ring with Pac, and about, next week. And Pac basically says that, he beat Darby Allin, and, John Moxley, who he's supposed to wrestle next week on the Jericho Cruise, is out with an injury, so he should win via forfeit, become the new #1 contender. But out comes Moxley, rocking a sweet eye patch as he barges out of the ambulance. He gets on the microphone on stage and says he's gonna, beat Pac's ass next week on the Cruise. And that's how the show ends. Moxley looking very strong. I kind of wish they added some intrigue, waited until the next week to see whether he was good to go. But he shows just the toughness and the tenacity and the badassery of Moxley here, so that's to be gained from that. Again, good showing by Allin to be in the main event here. The coffin drop to the outside was insane. Yeah, not much more you could say about it. Darby looks good, but Pac looks better. Time now for me to decide which show won for the week, NXT or AEW Dynamite. This week it's pretty much a no-brainer that NXT wins this one. They just really hit you over the head the entire 2 hours with great matches from beginning to end. Both the tag team matches were great. The triple threat with the cruiserweights, the battle royal, all told great stories and all had a lot of exciting action. The only thing I didn't really like about that show this week was just the Ciampa promo segment and the Undisputed Era beatdown, if only because it was so reminiscent and so familiar with the opening segment with Keith Lee and the Undisputed Era. I get having the Era kind of just storming on their opponents and stuff, but when the structure is almost identical, that almost took me out of it. As far as AEW goes, AEW had some fun moments here and there. I think that the opening tag team match was great. The Inner Circle beatdown on Moxley was a great storyline moment, great heat for Jericho, and just seeing DDP back in action, even as much as I'm I don't really want to see him get back in the ring and make a fool of himself, he looked good. I will say, for a 60-something-year-old man who doesn't wrestle at all anymore, he looks pretty good in that limited capacity. But Cody's promo kind of rubbed me the wrong way a bit. Again, strong conviction, strong delivery. Just thought it was a little too wink, wink, nudge, nudge for me. Too much insider terms. And then, the women's tag, I think, was just kind of a debacle. It's I've tried to put on a positive, optimistic face about the Nightmare Collective for a long time, but I feel that this was almost a breaking point for me, especially just the way it's what's the point of debuting Luther as the muscle for your group when he's been completely just ineffective and totally feckless, and at the same time they're trying to prop him up. Oh, this Japanese deathmatch legend gets just pwned by women 2 weeks in a row. Check out this fucking loser. It's not a good look for Luther here, and just the whole Nightmare Collective, it's been a real snake bit from the beginning, and it's just, makes you wonder where they're going with it, of all of the weird groups in AEW. Again, I've never said it was great. I was just willing to give it a chance, but now now I'm kind of running out of patience with the Nightmare Collective. And this match here really solidified that for me. Because when Statlander beats them so definitively here, like, where do you go? Like, what's the end game? What's the, oh, we're going to get him next week? I don't know. I'm just kind of, this is the point where I'm kind of done with the Collective for now until they really do something to impress me, but we'll see. But before I go, I do want to congratulate AEW for getting that contract extension with TNT through 2023, getting more money, getting a better deal, and so clearly it shows they're doing something right. But let me know what you thought about NXT and AEW this week in the comment section below. Be sure to vote which show you thought was better by going to the iCard in the corner of your screen. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.